Peace, love, and light, everyone. This is the Accountability Podcast, and I'm your host, Tema-Ra Huston. We have a special episode today. I'm going to not be talking. I'm going to have an awesome elder here that is going to teach us and give us the knowledge, that we really, really need, okay? Elder Peace, how you doing, sir?
Brother Peace is fine.
Oh, Brother Peace, okay.
Brother Peace is fine.
How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for giving me your time and your energy and coming to speak to the people.
It's my privilege. It really is my privilege.
We appreciate you.
Yes.
All right, so today this is your show, and we are going to talk about the expansion of our intelligence in our community, and we would like, your expertise and your wisdom on that. So please just introduce yourself, tell the audience who you are, and a little bit about your story, so we'll know.
Yes, my name is Everlasting Omnipresent Peace. That's this is a peace that's beyond understanding. If we're in a place where we don't understand what's going on, we can still experience this everlasting omnipresent peace. This is a peace that's always here. This is a peace that cannot be made. It's the peace that's our natural condition. And as we engage in this spiritual practice that we'll be talking about, we can gradually come to experience this peace. It's for real, and it's always here. So I took birth in central Georgia and spent my earliest days in the country, out in Irvington, Georgia, where there were a lot of jobs there because the chalk mine was active. But later on, I finished grammar school and high school in Macon. And when I was coming up about high school time, of course, I noticed the bigotry and the discrimination that was going on in Macon. People have been ridden over the sidewalks, but go back to Africa and calling us different kinds of names of feces. And during that time, Martin Luther King Jr. was active. And I was wondering, how was Martin able to tell us to love these same people that were discriminated against us? Not all, of course, but so many, the whole system. And so I started wondering about that. And by the time I got to 10th and 11th grade, I was engaged in the movement here. In the sit-in movement, desegregation of the restaurants and the buses, etc.
Amazing.
And I noticed, one time that Martin seemed like he was sitting in a balcony and he was reading a book. So I couldn't see the title of the book, but I got my magnifying glass. I was about 11 or 12th grade then. And I put my magnifying glass on the spine of the book, and I saw that he was reading Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, out of India. So I said, well now, when I researched Martin more, I saw that he was really related to Gandhi, but he had his first encounter with the buses here in Macon. He had come back from Dublin, Georgia, which was about maybe 55 miles from here then. And he did his initial sermon at an AME church over there. In fact, most of the time when I go to Dublin, I'll go by that church. But his title of he's 13 years old. It was called The Negro and the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And after he did his speech over there, he and his teacher came back here through Macon, because at that time, we didn't have freeways. Oh. And so one had to come here to Macon, and then if there weren't enough seats for white people, black people would have to get up and move to the back. So the blacks were seated from the back to the front, whites were seated from the front to the back. You see, so I noticed that I knew all that, and Martin had gone through that. In fact, when they came from Dublin back here to Macon to continue on to Atlanta, there weren't enough seats. So Martin and his teacher were supposed to get up. Well, his teacher got up, but Martin wouldn't get up. His teacher had to beg him to get up out of that seat because the white passengers needed seats, you see. So he reluctantly got up, and at that time we had to go from Macon to Forsyth and Barnesville and Griffin. There were a number of different stops. I think it took about maybe 2 hours to get to Atlanta at that time. But Martin reluctantly stood up, and he said in his writing that he was angry as heck. He didn't say heck. He said
he was.
For many years, until he went to Crozer Theological Seminary after he came out of Morehouse. And during that time, he lived with I don't want to make the story too long, because some people can read this. But anyway, he came across the teachings of Mordecai Johnson. Mordecai Johnson had just returned from India in about 1950, 1951. And Mordecai had talked with Gandhi back in the 40s, because during the 30s and the 40s, the African-American intellectuals here, for the most part, were going to India and relating to Gandhi. In fact, it's recorded that one group was in India in the 1930s, and they told Gandhi that they felt so ashamed to have been slaves. And Gandhi said back to them that the shame wasn't to have been a slave, the shame was to have been a slave holder. Okay,
exactly.
So fast forward a little bit to the late 1940s when Mordecai Johnson was with Gandhi. And Mordecai was the president of Howard University from about 1926 about 1960. But anyway, he knew Gandhi personally. And so when he was leaving India in the late 1940s, about 45, maybe 46, don't quote me on those dates. But Gandhi told Mordecai Johnson, said, I probably won't be alive when you come back here. And sure enough, Mordecai came on back to America, and around 1950, he was speaking in Philadelphia. And Martin at that time was living with Reverend Sandy Ray. Reverend Sandy Ray was now a minister in Philadelphia, but he had gone to Morehouse with Martin Luther King Jr.'s father.
Okay.
And they both were poor, ragged boys at Morehouse College, right? But they were good friends. In fact, he was like a godfather to Martin later on. So when Martin was at Crozer Theological Seminary, he would go spend the weekends with Sandy Ray, Reverend Sandy Ray over in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So one time he went over and he saw that there were some posters around saying that Mordecai Johnson was coming to town. Well, most people knew then about Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois.
Gotcha.
And but those intellectuals knew that, yes, Booker T. and W.B. Du Bois had a lot in common. They were going about it in different paths. In fact, some people thought they were at odds, but they were both about freedom.
Okay.
So, but anyway, they knew that Mordecai Johnson, he was at another level, you see. So when King heard that Mordecai was coming to Philadelphia, he made it his business to try and see him when he came back. So when a week or so later, he came back to Philadelphia to hear Mordecai Johnson. And he was in the audience there as a young boy. King was about 19, maybe not older than 20. And so he was sitting in the audience, and Mordecai was talking, and all Mordecai talked about was Gandhi. So King said that he was so impressed, and he had heard about Gandhi, but hearing Mordecai Johnson speak so highly of Gandhi, he went out and bought every book that he could find on Gandhi, because then he knew what he would need in order to accomplish his mission. See, so I heard about King and knew about it, read about King, and I was trying to find out how was he telling us to love. So through King, I came up into Mordecai Johnson. I'm sorry, not only Mordecai, but Gandhi. And so the Indian people were struggling with the British, trying to get their land back from the British. They were oppressed by the British at that time. They exploited and colonized as usual. So anyway, we wondered now, here's Gandhi, where did he get? He's telling us to love too. He's telling us to love these people. Where did Gandhi get this knowledge from? So I'm questioning this. So then I started studying Gandhi. And some years later, I was in Los Angeles, and I was reading one of Gandhi's books. It's called All Men Are Brothers.
All Men Are Brothers.
Yeah, and that really, quote unquote, blew my mind, as they say on the street, right? Something like it was when I read Malcolm X's autobiography back some years ago. So in reading Gandhi, I'm still trying to find out, how did Gandhi tell us to love? To love, really. How was he able to do this? Because we know that Yeshua, according to what is written, said, love those who hate you, bless those who curse you. Do good to those who do you wrong, and pray for those who despitefully use and persecute you. So we had another preacher brother in Harlem, Adam Clayton Powell. He used to talk that too. But we were wondering, now Gandhi, they were oppressed and done all kinds of ways by the British, and he was telling us to love too. So where did Gandhi get this kind of knowledge from? So now I've traced Martin Luther King, because I was engaged in the movement when he was alive. From King to Gandhi, and now Gandhi's telling us to love the British, and the British were cutting off their thumbs, those who made fine silks.
That's crazy.
They would cut off their thumbs and get all the raw materials out of India and go take it to England. And of course, whatever was left over, they sell back to the colony, the silk, fine silks that the Indians were doing. And so, and all kind of other things that were being done to the Indian people by the British. So I'm saying, well, how can Gandhi tell us to love these people? What is this? How can he say love? And I found out that studying Gandhi, going deep into Gandhi, relatively deep into Gandhi, I found that Gandhi was studying Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, you sound like you've heard of it.
I have.
Okay.
I haven't done much research, but I'm
But
about
you
to get
heard
the
of it,
knowledge
but
right now.
Great. Yeah, so Gandhi was saying, Gandhi said in his autobiography, this is almost a verbatim quote. So you can probably, we used to have that book here in the library here at Mercer University.
Okay.
But Gandhi says, and this is almost a verbatim quote now, so you ever get that book and bring it back to me, you say, Brother
sure
Peace,
will.
now, let me hear you say what you said. Now here it is right there, let me see. But this is almost verbatim. Gandhi says in his autobiography, the autobiography is called The Story of My Experiments with Truth. The autobiography of Mahatma Gandhi. Mohandas. People call him Mahatma. Maha means, in Sanskrit, Maha means great, Atma means soul. So when Gandhi came back from South Africa, I think it's about 1918, somewhere in there. And he had his affair in South Africa, so he was known. That's a whole thing about him. We can talk about him later, but I don't want to take too much time in this. But anyway, when Gandhi came back to India, people were calling him Mahatma. Mahatma. Maha means great, Atma means soul. So, but he didn't like it, but it stuck. But his birth name was Mohandas Gandhi.
Mohandas.
Mohandas. Mohan means one who's so, that's another name for Krishna. See, one is so beautiful. Krishna is the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita, you know. So Mohan means, is another name for Krishna. It means one who's so beautiful and so attractive that even he attracts Cupid. Mohan. And so Das means servant in Sanskrit. Servant or slave. We prefer servant, right?
Oh, yes.
So he was called Mohan Das. That's what his parents named him.
Okay.
And most people can find out more about Gandhi on their own, but I want to keep to your question. So anyway, so he was called Mahatma. And I found out that Gandhi was studying Bhagavad Gita, and that was spoken by Krishna on a battlefield in India, according to some sources, about 5,000 years ago, on a battlefield called Kurukshetra in India. And it's called the most authoritative book in the Vedas. Veda means knowledge. So the Bhagavad Gita is called the cream of the Veda. And it was spoken by Lord Sri Krishna on a battlefield to his cousin and disciple Arjuna. Arjuna was a warrior. In fact, he was a general in his brother's army. But so it's the whole thing, you can check out the Mahabharata to hear more about the story, and maybe I'll talk to you about it more later.
Okay.
But Arjuna was having a problem. He was on the battlefield there, and this was a civil war. So you had friends and relatives and cousins and teachers and uncles and on both sides of the battlefield. So Krishna arranged to drive the chariot for Arjuna. So when they got to the periphery of the battlefield, they looked over the battlefield, and we had thousands of men on both sides, horses and elephants and foot soldiers, infantrymen on both sides. And they were all related to each other, or friends of each other. So Arjuna saw this, and he was perplexed. So he said, Krishna, move my chariot between the two armies now, so that I can see who's here. So Krishna took the chariot and moved between the two armies. And then he could see relatives on both sides, his teachers on both sides of the battlefield, and they were getting ready to go into a great war, carnage, really. And Arjuna just lost all composure. He dropped his bow and arrows on the floor of the chariot. Krishna's driving, Arjuna's in the rear. And he said, Krishna, I cannot fight. I shall not. And he was a general, general in the army. Generals on both sides of the battlefield, teachers on both sides of the battlefield. Actually, it's a war between good and evil. Some define it like this. War between good and evil. So Krishna starts talking with Arjuna. Arjuna started telling him all the different reasons why he couldn't fight. And Krishna told him, in essence, Arjuna, you're trying to sound very intelligent, but really you're foolish. He said, in essence, you're not the body. For the soul, we are the soul. For the soul, there's never birth nor death. Nor having once been, does it ever cease to be. It's unborn, it's undying. It's not slain when the body is slain. So Krishna continued to talk with Arjuna about all kinds of yoga, all about life, the business of life, the purpose of life, why are we suffering, the cause of suffering, the way out of suffering, etc.
Now, this is happening while these two armies are
on
about...
both sides. Yeah, they're in the middle
wow.
of the battlefield talking.
Wow.
Actually, the conversation, some say it only took about 30 minutes.
Okay.
But after this, they went to war. But Arjuna was ready then. But Krishna had to awaken Arjuna out of the delusion, illusion, the infancy, the ignorance of identifying the body as being the self. Because we say the self is the soul. The self is the knower of the body. Now, we mentioned that the Kurukshetra is called the field. It's like field. We say that this body is the field, but the real self is the knower of the field. It's the one that knows. If you look closer, you see that you're looking at your hands. You can look at your nose. Who's looking at the nose? If I can see the side of my nose, if I can see the side of my face here, and you can't, one can experience this, then who is that looking? Can't be the body, can it? If we can know it, that means it's not us. But see, most of us in the world are laboring under the illusion that we are the material body. So we are some material designation, some race, some gender, some creed, some color, some nationality, some class, some caste, some creed, color, etc. And we see that this is the root of our problems in the world. When we look at the self as soul, that we are soul. For the soul that has never birth nor death, nor having once been, does it ever cease to be. We are the soul. We're the soul with the body.
Ashe.
Not the body, with the soul. If you look back in ancient Africa, so-called Africa now, we call it Akibulan. Look back in ancient Africa, or you look back in ancient India, our ancient spirituality. We see that our ancestors related to the self as being the spirit, the soul, and our supreme being as being the source of all energy, frequency, and vibration. It never changes. It is always here. The source of all truth, all righteousness, all love, and all peace. This is our own supreme being. We say this is what you get when you do Sankofa. You go back and get it. Go back and get your roots. Go back before the rise of Egypt, before the rise of Punt, before the opening of Ethiopia. You see, and we started living as a spiritual being, having a material experience. We're spirit, and we really can't hear that enough, because in the world, most of us are relating as being a material body.
You're right.
And we're having all kinds of problems, and we can never get satisfied, because it's not us. No matter how much we eat, how much we buy for our eyes, nose, tongue, belly, genitals, we find out we come up empty, we come up not fulfilled. Why? Because it's not the real self. The real self lives off spiritual food, real soul food.
Absolutely.
Real soul food. So knowledge of self is to know the self as a spiritual being. And this spirit, this material body is within the soul. The soul is pervading and transcending the body. And this is the self. It pervades and it's immanent as well as transcendent. And when we start getting real spiritual food, we'll find out that we're becoming more satisfied, becoming more contented, becoming more fulfilled. So those of us in my lineage, our spiritual practice, we say we have repentance first, to repent, because we've all made some foolish mistakes coming up, real crazy mistakes. And now we repent. And how do we repent? We relate to our supreme being, the source of all knowledge, all enlightenment, all intelligence. We just, I'm so sorry. I was so foolish. I didn't know any better. I was ignorant. But now we know we pay for what we don't know. So it behooves us to try to get more knowledge, more intelligence. And this is what we're about here. How do we expand our intelligence? This is the nature of the self. We say that our supreme being is omnipresent, eternally. It's present everywhere. It can never die. It's always here. It's omnipotent, the source of all thought. If you think about Oppenheimer and the atom bomb, and he quotes Bhagavad Gita as the explosion of the atomic bomb back in the late 1940s. But it's the source of all thought. So we say it's the source of all power. It's omnipotent. You see? It's omniscient, meaning that it knows all. And it's your own supreme being. And we emphasize your supreme being, our supreme being. It's the common center point of all of us. It's the centerless center point. It's omnipresent. It's pervading and transcending not just these material bodies, but the molecules that make up the body, the atoms that make up the molecules, the subatomic, the protons, neutrons, electrons that make up the atoms, the subatomic particles that make up the subatomic particles. And it's so small and so subtle that it can pervade and transcend the spaces between the subatomic particles. So that it's smaller than the smallest, and it's greater than the bigger than the biggest simultaneously at the same time, you see.
You speak the whole word.
So we say it's not just great, it's a great test. It's a great test, not just great, because that's comparative. We say it's superlative. It's super superlative. And that is smaller, so small that it pervades the most subtle. We say that the air, ether is most subtle than the air, rarefied air. But this is most subtle than the ether. And it's pure intelligence. There are some teachers or some thinkers, and some thinkers who would say that this supreme being is pure intelligence. That's some folks like me, right?
Okay.
There are some who say that it is pure awareness. There's some who declare it as pure consciousness. But we are positing that this pure intelligence pervades and transcends awareness and consciousness. Otherwise, how would consciousness know what to be conscious of? How would awareness know what to be aware of? So we say we can at least come to the conscious platform, seeing the self as conscious, but go beyond that even. And we see that that intelligence is pervading and transcending consciousness and awareness, you see.
All right.
So we say we change the way we look at the self. We start seeing the self as spirit. Seeing the self as spirit. And when we change the way we look at the self, we change the way we look at the world. And when we change, and this is the rest of the other 180 degrees from where, what's the teacher from North? I can't think, there was another great teacher who passed on some time ago. But he used to say, we change the way we look at the self, we change the way we look at the world. Well, we'll go along there. There's some more. There's the rest of it. Okay. We say the other 180 degrees. First, change the way you look at yourself. And when you change the way you look at the self, we change the way we look at the world. And that includes all sentient beings within it, not just human beings. Because we're not out here just for human beings. All sentient beings are suffering in the world of Maya. We call that the material world, the world of birth and death, a world of suffering, birth, death, rebirth, and full of suffering. Okay, wow, already. Okay, so we change the way we look at the self. We say the self is spirit, we're spiritual beings. When we change the way we look at the self, we change the way we look at the world. And then at this stage, see, we can understand why, how, and why we should love those who hate us. Why we should bless those who curse us, do good to those who do us wrong, and pray for those who despitefully use and persecute us. Change the way we look at the self, change the way we look at the world. And this way we can move toward a more perfect union. See? Because we have more in common than we have in difference. We have this supreme intelligence pervading and transcending every subatomic particle that's making up the molecules that make up this body. So when we start relating to the self, and we'll go into this in the next session, how we do it, because we have to engage in purification. Purification of intelligence, consciousness, and awareness. And we have a methodology for doing this.
All right. Well, you have definitely said a mouthful, and you done been to so many different places. I want to say thank you, because growing up, I actually have always been knowledgeable of, our community, Martin Luther King. They taught us that in school. But the fact that I've met someone who can tell me more about, because we all know that Martin Luther King was about nonviolence, but where did that come from? They don't give the background story on where that comes from. So the fact that you have, that knowledge and, that foresight for that is truly amazing. And everything that you talk about has to do with my platform. This podcast is about accountability. Again, it's about yourself, figuring yourself out, and a lot of us are walking around and don't know who we are. We don't know where we come from, and we are trapped in this bubble, of thinking that you're supposed to grow up, get a job, get the white picket fence, get a house, have some kids, retire at 70-something, and then die. Life is so much more than that.
Yes.
And you are dropping so many gems on that, and I really appreciate you. It's one thing for me to come up here and say this stuff, but it's another thing to have an elder who has experienced life and can honestly give you the knowledge, like you said, Sankofa back, and get the knowledge that we weren't here for.
Yes.
So you have introduced yourself and what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to make a part 2 of this, so we can get into the different ways that we can expand our intelligence.
Yes.
Because there's so many ways to do that, and we need to come together. Like you said, we have more in common than we have, differences.
Yes.
And we need to tap into that, especially in our community.
Yes.
We really need to tap into that knowledge and how to do that,
Yes.
with our own perspective, backgrounds, and, how we believe in things.
Yes.
So I appreciate you. We are going to come back tomorrow for part 2, and you're going to have some more knowledge with Brother Peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, tune in.